The hospital is a place of healing, but at 3 a.m., under the sterile glow of fluorescent lights, it can transform into something far more sinister. Turn off your lights, get comfortable, and listen closely to what these night shift nurses truly experienced when the veil between worlds thinned. Story 1, The Unlisted Patient. This happened to me in the fall of 2019, when I was working nights at St. Jude's Regional Hospital, a mid-sized facility serving the sleepy town of Harmony Creek. My route to work was always the same, a predictable 20-minute drive down Old Route 17, usually under a sky full of stars that the city lights never quite dimmed. I'd been an ER nurse for over 15 years by then, and the night shift felt like a second home. From 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., the emergency room could be a whirlwind of chaos or a lull of eerie calm, but I prided myself on knowing every creak, every shadow, and every usual suspect that wandered our halls. It was a comforting familiarity, a rhythm I had come to trust. My routine was a well-oiled machine: clock in, grab a coffee, check patient charts, and then start my rounds. There was a particular satisfaction in the quiet efficiency of the night crew. We were a tight-knit group, seasoned and dependable, dealing with whatever the darkness brought without fanfare. The ER itself was a relatively new addition, but it connected to the older sections of the hospital, wings that dated back to the 50s and 60s. These older parts were often quiet, sometimes even completely closed off for renovations or due to low patient numbers, their long, less-used corridors feeling like forgotten arteries of the building. It was during one of those unusually slow Tuesday nights, around 2 a.m., that I first saw her. I was heading to the break room, my mind already on the instant coffee I was craving, when a flicker of movement caught my eye down a dimly lit side corridor, leading towards the old pediatrics wing. A small girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, stood there. She was wearing a thin, white nightgown, almost glowing in the low light, and her dark hair fell messily around her shoulders. My first thought was immediate concern: a child shouldn't be wandering alone at this hour. I called out softly, "Sweetie, are you lost?" She didn't respond, just stood perfectly still, her back to me. I started walking towards her, intending to gently lead her back to her parents or find her chart. As I got closer, I saw a faint shimmer, almost like heat haze, around her small form. By the time I was only a few feet away, she simply wasn't there. No sound of footsteps, no open doors, no movement at all. Just the quiet hum of the hospital air conditioning and the lingering scent of something faintly earthy, like damp soil, that seemed out of place in our sterile environment. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, convinced fatigue was playing tricks on me. I checked the nearby patient rooms, all locked or empty. I even radioed security, asking if anyone had reported a missing child, but the answer was negative. Must be tired, I muttered to myself, dismissing it as a hallucination. A few nights later, the same thing happened. I was reviewing charts at the nurses' station, located strategically at the junction of the ER and the quieter pediatric wing. My head snapped up when I heard a faint, almost childlike hum, too soft to be real, coming from the old corridor. There she was again, the same girl, in the same white nightgown, standing a little further down the hall, near room 217. Room 217 was always empty, one of the first rooms in the pediatric section that had been decommissioned due to outdated equipment. This time, I felt a prickle of unease. I approached more cautiously, my heart thumping a little faster. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't move, her back still to me, but this time I distinctly felt a sudden drop in temperature around me. It was like walking into a cold pocket of air. As I stepped closer, her form seemed to waver, like looking at an image through rippling water. The earthy smell was stronger now, mixed with something else, something cloying and sweet, like wilting flowers. My hand reached out, almost involuntarily, but before I could touch her, she dissolved. It wasn't a disappearing act, more like she simply ceased to be. One moment there, the next, a blank space where she had stood. I immediately checked the patient census again. No children admitted in pediatrics. No families waiting in the ER. No child patients in any wing of the hospital. The hair on my arms stood on end. This wasn't fatigue. This wasn't a trick of the light. This was something else. I began to keep an eye on that corridor, telling myself it was just curiosity, but deep down, a seed of genuine fear had been planted. Over the next few weeks, her appearances became more frequent, always between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Sometimes I'd only catch a glimpse of her reflection in a polished door, or see her just at the edge of my peripheral vision. She was always near unoccupied rooms, specifically the ones in the older pediatric wing. The most unsettling part was that she started to face me. Not directly, not with a clear gaze, but sometimes I'd turn a corner, and she'd be there, her head slightly bowed, as if watching the floor. Then, as I approached, she'd slowly lift her head. Her eyes, when I could discern them in the low light, seemed unnaturally dark, like deep pools, but never quite meeting mine. And her mouth, it was always slightly ajar, as if she was about to speak, or had just finished whispering something I couldn't hear. No smile, just that silent, open mouth. I tried talking to my colleagues, casually asking if they'd ever seen a little girl wandering around at night. They all looked at me strangely, chuckling about sleep deprivation. One younger nurse suggested I needed a vacation. I stopped asking. The dread began to build, a constant companion on my shifts. I knew she wasn't a living patient. The cold spots, the earthy smell, the way she simply unmade herself from existence. Every fiber of my professional training screamed at me to report it, but to whom? And what would I say? Then, one especially quiet night, around 3 a.m., I was doing a final check of the ER before my shift ended. I passed the entrance to the old pediatric wing, and there she was, standing further down the hall than usual, almost at the very end. This time, she wasn't just standing. She turned her head slowly, directly towards me. For the first time, her eyes met mine. They were not malicious, not angry, but held an intense, pleading emptiness. And then, she lifted a tiny hand, her palm flat, and slowly, deliberately, crooked her index finger, beckoning me. A jolt of primal fear, hot and cold at once, shot through me. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was beyond anything I had ever encountered. But woven through the terror was a thread of something else, a deep, unsettling curiosity. What did she want? Why was she here? Against every rational instinct, against every rule about not engaging with unverified entities, I started to walk. My legs felt heavy, my movements slow and deliberate, as if wading through thick mud. The air grew progressively colder with each step, and the scent of damp earth and decay intensified. She maintained her distance, always just ahead of me, her silent, beckoning finger guiding me deeper into the deserted, dusty labyrinth of the old pediatric wing. The lights here were weaker, some flickering, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to twist and writhe with my every breath. Finally, she stopped in front of a door marked, "Maintenance Closet, Do Not Enter." This wasn't a patient room at all. It was an old storage area, rarely opened, certainly not for pediatric use. The paint was peeling, and a thick layer of dust covered the old brass handle. She turned slightly, still not fully facing me, and pointed a tiny finger at the door. Her mouth was open again, a silent "oh," as if trying to form a word. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the cold metal handle, every nerve screaming at me to turn and run. But I didn't. I couldn't. I had to know. With a deep, shaky breath, I gripped the handle and twisted. It groaned in protest, a long, drawn-out metallic screech that echoed eerily in the silent hall. The door slowly swung inward, revealing absolute darkness within. The interior was a void, smelling intensely of old wood, dust, and something else, a faint, sickly sweetness that made my stomach lurch. I fumbled for my phone, trying to use its flashlight, but before I could, the girl stepped into the darkness. She was just a silhouette now, barely visible against the profound blackness. She reached down, picked something up, and turned back towards me. As she stepped forward, the faint light from the corridor illuminated it, an ancient, porcelain doll. The doll was unsettling, even in her small hands. Its porcelain face was cracked and stained, one eye missing, the other a vacant, glassy stare. Its dress was tattered and faded, a miniature, grimy version of the girl's own nightgown. It felt impossibly old, radiating a forgotten sadness. She held it out to me, her small hand trembling slightly. I reached for it, my fingers brushing against the cold, hard porcelain. The moment my hand closed around the doll, a powerful surge of cold enveloped me, colder than anything I had felt before. A deep, guttural creak shattered the silence. The heavy, wooden door to the maintenance closet began to swing inward, slowly, inexorably, with a horrifying finality. The girl, her offering made, simply wasn't there anymore. Vanished. Gone. The door slammed shut. Not a gentle close, but a heavy thud that reverberated through my bones. I was trapped. Alone. In absolute darkness, clutching that hideous doll. Panic exploded within me. I dropped the doll with a clatter, fumbling desperately for the doorknob. My fingers scrambled against the cold metal, twisting, pulling, pushing. It wouldn't budge. It was locked. From the outside. The air grew impossibly heavy. Cold seeped into my very bones. A sound. A faint, dragging sound. Something moving in the darkness behind me. Shallow breaths. Close to my ear. I could feel it. Feel the air stir against my neck. That sickening sweet smell of decay filled my nostrils. My mind screamed. Get out. Get out now. I kicked at the door, yelled for help, my voice a strangled sob. The breathing was louder. Right behind me. I heard a low, raspy whisper, too distorted to understand. My skin crawled. Something touched my back. A brush, light as cobwebs, but intensely cold. I shoved myself against the door, adrenaline lending me a surge of impossible strength. I pulled the handle one last time, with all my might. A sharp, splintering crack echoed. The old wood around the lock gave way. The door burst open, spilling me into the relative gloom of the corridor. I stumbled out, gasping, my heart threatening to beat out of my chest, tears streaming down my face. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I ran. Ran like a person possessed, ignoring the pain in my lungs, the tremors in my legs. I ran through the quiet halls, past the nurse's station, out the staff exit, into the blessed chill of the early morning air. I drove home in a daze, the rising sun doing little to dispel the shadows in my mind. I called in sick that day, and the next, and the one after. I tried to tell myself it was a nightmare, a stress-induced hallucination, anything to rationalize it. But I knew the truth. I never went back to St. Jude's. I couldn't. Every creak, every shadow, every quiet corridor would have brought me back to that moment. I found a new job, in a different town, a bustling clinic where the lights were always bright and the sounds were always human. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and my own thoughts are too loud, I still smell that faint, damp earth. I still feel that sudden drop in temperature. And I still see her, just at the edge of my vision, a small girl in a white nightgown, silently beckoning. And I wonder, what was it she wanted me to find? What was trapped in that room, and was I the one she lured to free it? Or was she trying to lure me to join it? And sometimes, I worry. I worry about the doll. I left it there, on the floor of that closet, swallowed by the darkness. Did whatever was in that room follow me, Or did it attach itself to the next poor soul who stumbled upon its forgotten resting place? I don't know. All I know is that some things are meant to stay unlisted, meant to stay forgotten. And if you ever find yourself walking a quiet hospital corridor late at night, and you see something that isn't on the charts, something that beckons you into the darkness, don't follow it. Just keep walking. And pray it doesn't follow you home. Story 2, Room 304's Final Bell. This happened to me in the fall of 2019, when I was working nights at Millhaven General, a small, slightly outdated hospital just off Old Highway 52. I'd taken the night shift because it paid a little better and, honestly, I preferred the quiet hum of the building between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. My routine was solid: arrive by 10:45, grab a lukewarm coffee from the break room, check the charts, and begin my rounds. The nurses on the night shift were a tight-knit bunch, bonded by shared exhaustion and the eerie stillness of the hospital after midnight. We looked out for each other. It was a good job, familiar and mostly predictable. I loved the sense of purpose, helping people, even if most of my patients were sound asleep. The biggest drama usually involved a stubborn 4 or the ancient ice machine breaking down yet again. My route home, a winding 15-minute drive, became a meditative ritual, the dark fields blurring past my window. Life was stable, simple, and exactly what I needed at that point in my career. Nothing ever really happened in Millhaven General. That changed, slowly, subtly, with Room 304. It was down a less trafficked wing, a room that had been officially empty for months. Our last patient there, a Mr. Silas Thorne, had passed away back in June after a particularly difficult and drawn-out illness. One night, around 2:45 a.m., I heard it for the first time, the distinct ding-dong of a call bell. It was faint, almost a whisper, but undeniable. I was at the nursing station, just finishing up some charting, and I paused, listening. My eyes immediately went to the illuminated panel above the desk, but no light was on. I shook my head, assuming it was a trick of the old building, a strange acoustic phenomenon, or maybe just my own fatigue playing tricks. The next week, it happened again. This time, I was closer, doing a quick check of an unoccupied storage closet near 304. The bell rang, sharper now, clearly emanating from that empty room. I walked over, my heart giving a small, unnecessary thump. The light above the door to room 304 was dark. I pushed the door open a crack, peering into the silent, dark space. The bed was stripped, the mattress bare, and the room was meticulously clean. Nothing. I checked the call cord, hanging innocently by the bed, well out of reach of anything. I even tried pressing it myself. The bell at the station rang clear and loud. But when I let go, the room was silent once more. This became a nightly occurrence. Almost every shift, between 2:45 and 3 a.m., the bell from room 304 would ring. Sometimes it was soft, sometimes surprisingly loud, but always from that empty room. My colleagues, of course, never heard it. They'd shrug it off as an electrical glitch, or blame the old wiring. But I knew it wasn't. The sound was too distinct, too consistent, and it only ever came from 304. The rest of the wing was perfectly quiet. I started feeling a chill whenever I walked past that room, a sensation that wasn't just the hospital's air conditioning. It was a cold that seemed to seep into my bones, originating directly from behind the door of room 304. I began to dread that particular time of night. The bell started ringing longer, too. Not just a single ding-dong, but a sustained, almost insistent summons. It felt like it was ringing for me. I found myself walking slower past the room, my body tense, my senses on high alert for any other anomalies. One night, I caught a faint, metallic scent in the air near the room, like old pennies mixed with something damp and earthy. It was gone almost as soon as I registered it, but it made the hairs on my arms stand on end. Every clock I passed seemed to be stuck on 2:58 a.m. The psychological dread was far worse than any tangible threat. I started researching Mr. Silas Thorne's chart, something I wouldn't normally do. His death had been prolonged, marked by increasing confusion and agitation in his final weeks. There were notes about him constantly pressing his call bell, even when nurses were in the room. He'd often claim to see someone at the foot of his bed, or hear voices calling his name from the hallway. He'd been terrified, the notes suggested, right up until the end. I felt a shiver, a cold understanding blooming in my chest. He hadn't been calling for nurses then, not really. He had been calling for help. Or maybe, calling out to something. And now, he was still calling. For what, or for whom, I didn't want to imagine. The call bell from 304 became unbearable. It wasn't just loud, it felt like it was ringing inside my head, resonating with a desperate, ancient energy. It was always at 3 a.m. exactly now, no more variation. One Tuesday night, just as the digital clock on the nursing station flipped to 3 o'clock, the bell started. It was piercing, the loudest it had ever been. It resonated down the empty hallway, echoing off the linoleum floors. But this time, it wasn't just the bell. A low, raspy whisper slithered from the crack under the door of room 304. It was too soft to discern words, but it was there, an undeniable plea or summons. It pulled at me, a morbid curiosity overriding my survival instincts. I walked towards the room, each step heavy. I reached the door, my hand shaking as I touched the cold metal handle. The whisper grew louder, more distinct, like dry leaves rustling. It was calling my name, I was sure of it, a guttural sound that scratched at my ears. I pushed the door open, slowly. The room was dark, even darker than the hallway, as if it swallowed the ambient light. The cold inside was immediate and absolute, a chilling embrace that stole my breath. The air smelled of damp soil and something faintly sweet, sickeningly so. The bell stopped. A silence descended, heavier and more profound than any silence I had ever known. It pressed down on me, suffocating. Then, from the empty bed, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor began. The mattress sagged, slowly. A dark, skeletal shadow began to rise from the bare mattress. It wasn't solid, but it consumed the small light that dared to enter the room. It was tall, impossibly thin, and it stretched upwards, elongating. 2 pinpricks of light, like dying embers, appeared where eyes should have been. It swayed, slowly, deliberately. A long, spectral arm, impossibly thin, extended towards me. It reached for me, a silent, desperate grasp. Its fingers, like bone-thin branches, stretched. It was moving faster now. Reaching. Coming for me. My mind screamed. My body froze. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Then the call bell let out one final, deafening shriek. It wasn't a ding-dong this time, it was a screech, a sound of pure agony and desperate hunger that tore through the air, ripping through my ears, echoing in the cold silence. The sound jolted me. I stumbled backwards, gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs. I turned and fled. I didn't close the door. I just ran, my feet pounding down the empty hallway, the shrieking still ringing in my ears. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my car, fumbling with the keys, starting the engine, and speeding away down Old Highway 52. I never looked back. I never went back to Millhaven General. Now, whenever I hear a distant bell, or feel an inexplicable chill, I can't help but wonder. Was Mr. Thorne, in his final terror, truly seeing something? And was the call bell, in room 304, now ringing for me? And if you ever work a night shift, and you hear a call bell from an empty room at 3 a.m., don't answer it. It might not be ringing for a nurse, but for a new patient.